So the first thing you definitely need to know is the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture. And the aperture is how much light enters the lens of your camera. And what that will determine is the exposure of your picture. So the more light that enters the lens of the camera, the more brighter your picture will be. And the less light that enters the lens of your camera, the less exposure your picture will have, which means it'll be darker. Now you guys are probably thinking, okay, well that seems pretty simple. How are the numbers now associated with aperture? How that's associated with, just in simple terms, is that the bigger or the larger the number on the aperture scale, that means the less light will enter through it. The smaller the number on the aperture scale, the more light will enter through it. So it's pretty much just determining that. Just think of it opposite. Smaller number, more light. Bigger number, less light. Now moving on to shutter speed. Shutter speed has to do with exposure, but I want to talk about not that so much right now. I'll talk about that later on. Right now I want to concentrate on motion. Shutter speed has a lot to do with motion. So for example, if I'm taking pictures of a person that's, you know, not moving, or an object that's still, I'll typically have it at 1/60th of a second, which isn't bad. I mean, you could mess around that once you get the gist of how to use your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed together, but typically I leave it at 1/60th of a second. For moving objects, on the other hand, what I'll do with that, when I'm taking pictures of band members at concerts and stuff, I'll set my camera to 1/125th of a second. Sometimes you can increase it depending on, like, if you're taking pictures of the drummer and you don't want their hands to come out blurry because they're drumming really fast, or if they're not moving a lot on stage, then you can decrease it. But again, that affects your aperture and it affects your ISO. So remember, still objects means that about 1/60th, you know, is fine for a still object. And if you have a moving object, like for example, if I'm taking pictures of a moving band member, or if I'm taking pictures of a drummer, then I want to have it about 1/125th of a second. Now moving on to ISO. ISO is typically supposed to mimic the little film canisters that you find inside the disposable cameras, or the ones you could find at Target or CVS or Rite Aid. It's pretty much that. It's talking about film sensitivity. If you set it to about 100 to 200, you're pretty good to shoot outdoors in the daylight. But if you're inside, you're gonna want to bump that up to like 1,000 something, or sometimes even 3,600, because that's what I have to use sometimes, even though it comes out with a little grain. Because the more ISO you use, you know, the higher the number, that means the more grain your photo will have. So that's about it, guys, and I hope you use this video to satisfy your needs of photography. No, that's not what I meant. Anyways, I hope this video was useful to you. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!